Hello and welcome to the Two Trees. We're here to talk about angels, demons, ghosts, the pagan gods, and the weird corners of the Bible. We're here to talk about the beliefs of the ancient world, the way that they talked about the supernatural world, all to help you understand the people and the context of the Bible, to help you engage on a deeper level with the text of Scripture. But more important than anything else we're trying to do, we're trying to show you Jesus. As Deuteronomy 10:17 describes him, the Lord your God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome. Well, I'm excited to be back here at the Two Trees. I am here with several of my best friends. Notice I said best friends, Martin. If I was going hiking, I would take them with me. Martin Listener.
Hey, y'all.
Steve Deaton.
Hello, everybody.
And Jacob Kessling.
What's up?
Jacob, you're just back from an exciting clergy retreat, right? You took all your elders from your church out partying for days at a time.
You know, we just we merged not too long ago, and it's not too common you hear of churches kind of coming together and trying to figure this thing out. And we kind of realized that we didn't know each other real well. So we scheduled a retreat, found a cabin in the woods somewhere. And as we were heading down the road down to this cabin, and I was like, "This seems super sketchy."
Isn't that how horror movies start?
Yes.
Normally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we finally get there, and we had a great time. Just a really good time together. Last night, we laughed and laughed and laughed. So it was great. Got to know each other a little bit more, and got to pray together, and got to study and to wrestle through the text together. And it was just I had a great time.
So, John, now that means that I've gone on a little cabin getaway with, of course, some of my bestest of friends.
Your wife.
And now...
I didn't get invited.
And now Jacob's gone away on what seems to be a cabin getaway with some of his very good
I
friends.
also didn't get invited.
So I'm starting to see a trend here. Steve, are you going anywhere in the next week or so?
Well, I think John and I are planning to go to Virginia maybe and do a little trout fishing. So,
Perhaps you weren't invited, fellows.
eat that.
How about that?
I only hope so.
I'm excited about it. We have a spot down there that has beautiful trout, and we're going to try to catch them all.
And we did that last year, and with the idea that we would come back and eat the trout. John, how many trout have we ate since our last trip?
Zero
trout.
But the potential to eat those trout is still
It's
there.
very
They're
strong.
still in the freezer.
Yes.
Nick's got them.
Yes.
No, I think it's more about the camaraderie, the catching
Absolutely.
of them.
Yep.
We filleted those babies, and they're ready to go. But I don't know. Maybe we'll throw them back. Maybe we won't. We'll see.
I think it's a little late to throw them back.
Well,
Don't
not
you think?
those ones. The ones we're gonna catch.
Oh, okay.
I'm not invited just because I'm not the expert on the fly fishing. Actually our first time fly fishing was with John, and I think I scared every fish.
So we go to
Yeah, this is
Gatlinburg,
crazy.
and we hike up to the headwaters of the Little Pigeon,
It's gorgeous.
and we're after brook trout. And they're a very finicky fish. They're real small. They're beautiful fish, but you can't go clomping around. And so I'm explaining this to Jacob. Hey, this is his first time fishing. We're going down there, and you got to walk up quiet on the waters and fish upstream. And I get down to the water, and all of a sudden I hear the mountainside breaking loose behind me.
That was really bad.
And he's just sliding down the street.
Into the water.
All these rocks are landing in the water.
I would have paid a
slipped.
lot of money to be there.
He proceeded to slide 40 feet down
It
the
was
mountainside.
And then you get out fly fishing, just slapping that fly on the water. I knew everything was fleeing.
In
Felt
terror.
terrible.
In absolute
Then
terror.
John moved up the river a little further. Oh gosh, this is gonna be. We didn't catch a thing.
I
but
do
it was
blame
beautiful.
John, though, really. I mean, Jacob and quiet, have you ever heard those in the same
Exactly.
sentence? So,
I don't know. Yeah, his expectations have been really low.
Well, I expected you to be able to walk up to the water.
I just chose the wrong rock. I slipped. It was anyway.
It really
I
was
wasn't
only
ready.
great because I had just had my serious face on. I was like, all right, we got to be real quiet.
was
Watch
game
where you
time.
put your feet, that kind of thing. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous out there. The leaves
so
look
much
perfect. The water is perfect. And all those fish, they were terrified, man. There was this army of bear-like noises walking down. It was so loud.
Right. No bear sightings, I'm assuming.
No bear sightings because they also would have taken off into the
exactly.
hills. We don't know what's going on, but it's
Yeah.
not safe down there.
It was really bad, but I had a blast. I mean, I could have just sat on the side of the river and just sat there and
See, I'm the same way. To me, fishing, especially trout fishing or fly fishing, is is just as much about the place that I am as much as it is the ability to. I mean, it's always better when you catch fish.
What is it about like the sound of running water or
soothing.
being out in the wilderness? It's just it's so good for your soul, your spirit. It's just like, I was talking to several guys in different conversations, and all of them say the same thing. Like, just being out in the nature is just very good for them.
I have a hard time in the winter, partially because of that. Like, I rely on being able to go for a walk or to go fishing or to go down to the water. And in the wintertime, I just hate being outside.
It's just cold.
Ohio wind is the devil. Like, it is just bitter cold. Canada is breathing down my neck in all the meanness that Canadian weather has for me is just after me, and I just don't like being cold.
That's just sad.
Yeah.
I don't mind
Sorry
cold.
for you.
I don't mind cold. You know, you get way too hot and just can't strip off enough clothes without getting
right there
called.
with
Cops called on you.
Right there with you.
It's just
You can always put another
I
shirt
have a
on.
privacy
You can.
fence, it's okay.
you can't always put another shirt on. But
right.
you know, I love the green of summertime, and I love the colors of fall. But spring is also one of my favorite seasons if it didn't rain so much. But winter, it can get depressing. It's
Winter
just
is
dark.
depressing. I'm excited that it's coming to an end. We're going to run up with Deaton, and we're going to try to catch some fish. while he's a landscaper, so
That's right.
he's
So
off
we're
in
getting
the
ready to gear up to get busy. It's going to be fun
wintertime.
to be able
So I haven't talked to my wife about it. So hopefully I've talked to her before this airs.
to. Right. Just let her listen.
Martin and I haven't got the invite yet. We're just kinda
Yeah,
waiting.
you keep
It's probably
looking.
in the mail.
I'll check the
You
mailbox.
I haven't been in the
looking.
mail. I haven't been. Gosh, that's. I'll check. I'll check tonight.
Well, I'm glad your meeting went well and that you had a good time there with your elders
was
and
great.
that it went good. But we are going to be introducing a new topic tonight. It's not really new. It's a couple thousand years old. We're talking about demons. What exactly is a demon? And it's a gigantic word, and it has 1,000 different meanings to 1,000 different people. The way that the Bible uses this word is different in the Old Testament from the New Testament. If you read the New Testament, you're going to find Jesus is interacting with demon-possessed people all over the place. They seem to be all around him. But you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find demon-possessed people in the Old Testament. Is that because there weren't demons in the Old Testament? You don't find the word used nearly as much. And this has caused some people reading their Bible some confusion. So we want to try to help with that. When you think of a demon, Jacob, what comes to mind when you think of a demon?
Just like, well, first, certainly a spirit, something that tries to drive fear, a tyrant, moving things around in houses. I mean, I have lots of stories of things like this, but I just think of just spirit beings that try to drive fear. I'm not afraid of their power or anything like that necessarily, but try to stir up some fear in people. That's just kind of what I think about.
What about you, Martin? Is this a word that you're familiar with or comfortable using?
Well, yes and no. And I've mentioned this before a couple different times. A year and a half ago, before I started this spiritual journey with y'all, that's journey and a y'all for Nick. I had to throw that in there. Dang it. As well.
Journey's my word.
But anyway, before starting this, it was always a thing where it's like, yeah, I get it, and it's in movies and this, that, and the other. But like, can they move your couch around? I don't know. Can they do this? I don't know. Can they enter your body and make you do weird things and see weird things? So I don't really know. But the more I read about it, the more I see it at work in the Bible. It's like, yeah, that kind of stuff I guess really could be out there. And not to sound like a conspiracy theorist calling on Bigfoot or anything, but it seems like that kind of stuff could be out there. And it's something that is more... or it's something that is way less than, a big red guy with horns and fire around him and this, that, and the other. It's a spiritual type being that can control your life in certain ways and not in the fact of, like, in my opinion, not making you move a certain way, but implanting things into your brain that make you react certain ways, a lot of times driven by the fear that you
Do you
mentioned.
think that, like, and this is one of those questions that I've been asking is, because I also... and knew about demons, I knew the definition of them, but like when you talk about the practical side of things or how things operate, I'm kind of I was in the dark about this for years, and I'm wondering if it's not a tactic of the evil one just to kind of try to keep us all like believing that they don't exist, that's not going on. And there's also the other side of there are people who out there who just want to blame everything they do on the devil. Devil made me do it, instead of like, no, you made a really dumb decision. got to try to figure out how to have some balance, but recognize that they're out there. That what's their purpose? What are they trying to do? How does it affect us? How does it affect our kids? How does it affect? Because the Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers. And so there's something that's happening, and how does that work? And this is where you get into scriptures and trying to find what's happening here. What can we see? And
I think you're definitely onto something with the the evil one trying to keep it a secret, or trying to keep us away from the knowledge of having that. And I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but when you look at like Hollywood, for instance, you see a lot of this kind of stuff in movies and in plays and stuff. And I think that helps with us differentiating it between like, well, that's a movie or it's not real, or, the whole based on a true story thing means that it's not real at all, compared to, real life where it's like, man, this stuff could really happen. And I've had conversations with a guy I work with about superheroes in the same manner, but kind of more along the lines with the giants that we were talking about, the men of renown and all this.
Yeah.
And why it resonates with us so well is because that stuff really happened. And so with these demonic movies and these scary movies, it's truly fearful, even though your mom will always tell you, no, it's not real, now go to bed. It's like it still resonates in us even at a young age. Like, this is something that we should be scared of. And so I think it means that it is real.
And we're going to get into specifics about, demon possession and oppression and some practical things that the church needs to be aware of. Because it's going to take a couple episodes,
right,
to really dig into this.
So spirits themselves, and I think I got this from maybe one of the things, or one of the books that Heiser had wrote, or one of his podcasts or whatever, that I had heard that these perhaps are disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, of these fallen ones that died in the days of Noah and or afterwards. This lineage, which interesting, they were following up our Nephilim stuff or our giant thing.
Yeah, this topic is connected to the Nephilim. And you bringing that up points out a big issue. I personally believe that what we say when we say demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So if someone's out there keeping score, that's my personal view.
So can I throw this question out real fast? Because I know that like all these ghost hunter stories that are out there, like people feel like, these are spirits of people that have been tortured and that kind of stuff. Where are you at in leaning on those kinds of thought processes? Like, these are people that were abused or murdered, and they're here at these places, these locations to taunt people that come in later or whatever the case is.
I'm not going to get into that in this episode.
Okay.
All that to say, I think that there is a much bigger spiritual world than the church is comfortable with.
Okay.
I think
so. We're going to talk about it later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about ghosts.
I'll hold off on it.
We're going to
Way
talk
to leave
about
them on
that.
the hook, John.
Yeah, no, that's
come
coming,
back
man.
next episode.
So here's
like
what
Dragon
I'm
Ball
trying
Z.
to do.
Find out on the next
Oh
episode.
man, those
It'll be like 4 episodes later. We talk about it.
So like it might
trees and ghosts.
Trees and ghosts, and
eventually.
But the word demon, it doesn't show up in the Old Testament. There is no Hebrew, or not ghost rather, but demon. There is no Hebrew word for demon.
Okay.
It doesn't exist. It's not a word that's part of the Hebrew vocabulary. It's not a word that you're going to find in the Old Testament. When it is used there in English, it's a transliteration of an idea of an evil spirit.
So is demon going to be clumped into just the evil realm? Is this like the jackals and owls?
Yeah, what happened was well, let me just explain it to you. Okay, so the word demon comes from daimone, and it's a Greek word. And so we don't find it in Hebrew literature, we find it in Greek literature.
Okay.
And so when they wrote the Old Testament in Greek, called the Septuagint, they used that Greek word to cover a lot of Hebrew expressions, like the knowing ones or the hidden ones, the Shedim, the princes of the darkness.
Okay.
And they used this word as like a giant catch-all phrase for evil being, an evil, spiritual, non-human being.
Okay.
And that's where the word came from. In Greek culture, they used that word pretty often, and it wasn't a bad thing. It was a way of describing a divine being, not the top tier divine beings, but like second class divine beings. They were the souls of powerful men and women who lived in the golden age, and now they watch over human affairs. And to me, that sounds an awful lot like the Nephilim. That sounds a lot like the idea of men of renown of the days long gone, who are now being worshipped. And that comes from the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, page 235. But in the Greek culture, they were really used to this expression, this idea. And so in the Old Testament, the culture is Egyptian, it's Assyrian, it's Babylonian, it's Israeli. And then in that intertestamental period, you find that the world becomes very, very Greek. Alexander the Great spreads his empire, and the Hellenization of the Middle East occurs. And now the language is different. And we see that reflected in the text. And so the question for us is, what do we mean when we say demonic? And what does the text mean when it says demon or demonic? And are those the same things? Because our culture has a definition for this. There's a good angel on my shoulder and a bad angel on my shoulder. And we've all seen scary movies or ghost hunters, and they're like, oh, no, that's not a ghost. That's a demon. You're like, well, what's the difference? Like, how did you come up with that? Like, is there, that one's got too many horns on its head. It's an evil one.
And you have Touched by an Angel with Charles Ingalls in it, or whatever his name
I've
is.
never seen an episode of Touched by an Angel.
Man.
I never have either.
So good.
I think I'm missing out. It probably would infuriate me.
I was a young lad when it was playing.
But a couple things to keep in mind as we're trying to determine what do we mean when we say demon, and how does the Bible use this phrase or this idea, is to remember that the Bible is not a science book. Its intent is not to give you a perfect picture into the supernatural world and explain to you kingdom, phylum, order. It's just not trying to do that. We have no idea how many species of spiritual beings exist. We don't. The Bible gives us a couple words like cherubim, angel, malachim. It gives us the words seraphim, cherubim, those kinds of things. But we're not told. Are there others, humans or spirits? We know that these demonic Nephilim type things, when they died, what were they? They weren't human and they weren't angels.
So, John,
they were this middle thing. And so it's a big confusing topic.
When you mentioned they're not, it's not setting up the kingdom, phylum, order, you're still indicating that a demon is bad.
Right, and that's where we're going to land right here. Okay. When most people say demon, what they mean is an evil spirit.
But you're not, I guess what you're saying by that, to put it in plain English for those of us like myself, is that it's not setting up like a demon is a general or a private. There's not a hierarchy system of where a demon would fall in, but it's definitely on the bad side.
It's on the side of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, when you brought up the good angel and the bad angel, or the demon angel, a demon is bad no matter what.
Yeah, you won't find any instances in the Bible of good demons. They are an evil spirit. They're sometimes called an unclean spirit. But there's no verse in the Bible that explains what a demon is. Instead, it uses words which were familiar to the ancient cultures to cover this idea of evil spirits. And so you'll find people who are really aggressive about this. Demons are fallen angels. Demons are the spirits of the Nephilim. Demons are this, that, and the other thing. And they get almost to the point where they're ready to yell at people about it. I'm going to tell you to hold your horses, have an opinion, but realize that the Word of God does not come out and say, this is exactly what's going on. We're dealing with a mystery, and one that the Bible talks about a lot. We're never left wondering whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we're not told the origin story. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's because the Lord is telling us, and I love the line in, I think it's The Silver Chair, that C.S. Lewis wrote, where Aslan is talking to one of the children. He says, I tell no one any story but their own. And the idea is not that we're not going to know one day, but it's not helpful for us to know this right now. Now, personally, I want to know. I would like...
Don't we all?
I want to know lots of things about this.
This is one of the high questions when you...
Yeah, I want to... And it seems so basic. Of course, why didn't you explain this to me, But we also don't get a verse in the Bible that explains lots of things that we'd like to know. There's another quote from the book called Demons, What the Bible Really Says About the Powers of Darkness by Michael Heiser. And this is early on in the book. And he kind of takes this idea and he divides it up into three things. He says, when most people are talking about the word demon, in the Old Testament in particular, it can be broadly categorized. This is page 8. Number one, terms that are associated with the realm of the dead and its inhabitants. So if something is talking to you out of a grave, that's a sign this is demonic. When the man in the New Testament, right, is demon-possessed by a legion of demons, he's dwelling in a graveyard, right? That's not an accident. Number two, the terms that denote geographical dominion of supernatural powers in rebellion against Yahweh. So territorial spirits that have claimed specific places. And number three, preternatural creatures associated with idolatry and unholy ground. We talked about Leviathan and those kind of ideas. There's goat demons that are described in the Old Testament as well. These are evil beings. And this vocabulary is explored throughout the rest of the book. But it derives from the rebellions that takes place in the book of Genesis. And so when we're talking about demons, what we mean is an evil spiritual being. Not the top shelf, but not nice. Are there powers like the Watchers that fell in Genesis 6? Mm-hmm. Those seem to be their own class, like maybe princes or higher, like you were talking about, a food chain or a system of command. But demon seems to be just this really broad catch-all term that you can use to describe any of the evil spiritual entities that exist. We'd be more comfortable perhaps with the word demonic than demon itself. This quote comes from the Dictionary of Deities and
So, John,
Demons.
before you get into
go ahead.
that, I do have a question, because when you were talking about that, there's nowhere in the Bible that it comes up of like a definition of what a demon is, or even demonic. And all of us were in agreement, and I think that pretty much everybody that I've ever talked to is in agreement that there is definitely curiosity into what demons are. I mean, there's a lot of shows where people that go in and have these high tech systems to try to measure what the demon is saying and what they're feeling and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess all around is, why is there such a widespread curiosity level about this? There's a lot of stuff that isn't said in the Bible, and we take it for what it is. But there's certain things, and I think demons come to the top of the list on that, of why are we so intrigued on wanting to need to know more about these demons? Like, where is it on the food chain? What does it look like? How do we prevent it? And all this stuff. There's almost this innate part of us that has to know more and is very curious about these demons. And it's like, why can't we just understand that it's a bad thing and we should stray away from them?
Do you think, Martin, though, that's connected to just the part of us that I think is born into every person, that I think deep down in we know that we're spiritual creatures? I mean, I'm talking about everybody, that, you know, those that even maybe profess atheism or, you know, have no spiritual belief whatsoever. But I think there's something deep in each of us that resonate with the idea of searching for what's on the other side. Like, we just know that there's something spiritual about the world we live in and about us as people. And so I wonder if that isn't some of that.
Well, that definitely ties into what we were talking about before about going to the river and why it's so calm and peaceful. And that was the same idea maybe on the other side, but there's this, I don't know, angelic or spiritual bliss that accompanies you when you go into the woods and when you sit next to the babbling brook and stuff.
Well, and I think the opposite of that is true as well. There are times when you feel watched, when there are powers arrayed against you. You go throughout just about any culture you want, and the idea of evil spirits is ubiquitous. Our history as a people points us to this, that there are things of which to be afraid in the dark.
There's some unexplainable things that happen, and have happened not just here, but like John said, there was a missionary from Papua New Guinea that came in, and they took a trail that they typically wouldn't take because their belief of it being an evil trail or evil presence being down there. For the sake of time, though, they ended up taking it. But with the guide of the group that was walking through to this village got picked up and thrown against a tree. And like, this kind of stuff happens. And so there, I don't want to say there's a fascination, but certainly as people experience these kinds of things, I think it'd be natural to figure out what's going on. I mean, people aren't typically equating it to God doing this stuff because it's not something that's loving or peaceable or something that brings joy, but this is something that drives fear and drives anxiety and it feels dark. So I think there's definitely, I don't think it's good to chase down that road by any means, but people who want power, sometimes they just want to attach to something that they feel that they can manipulate.
And I think we're seeing a rise in people talking about these things, partially also because we're seeing our culture move away from just a plain materialistic viewpoint of the world. When that was the predominant view, Satan's goal is not to make everyone demon possessed. His goal is to separate you from God. And so if he can do that with an excess of spiritual encounters, he'll do that. If he can do that with no spiritual encounters, he'll do that. And so what we're living through right now is a time when there is massive interest in the supernatural. There is massive interest in ghosts, in demons, in the gods of ancient cultures, of pagan places. And we're seeing a reawakening in many quarters of paganism. And I think that the church needs to be aware of that and not to shy away from these things, but to explain that this is something that the Bible does talk about. Doesn't mean that it's always going to happen the same way. Same way in chess, you don't always make the same move. In the spiritual war that Satan and God are fighting, Satan has different strategies in different times and different places. And sometimes the strategy is to overwhelm with spiritual terror, and sometimes it's to question the very existence of supernatural things through almost like a desert, not experiencing it all. And in the Old Testament, you may not see the word demon, but you definitely get supernatural evil entities. A lot of times it gives them names, like the Croucher or Rabisu. Probably the most famous one that I get asked questions about is Azazel in the book of Leviticus with the scapegoat. And we're gonna plunge in and look at that. But before we do that, I want to give as simple a breakdown of what we mean when we talk about the dark, what we talk about demons. What I mean by that is Satan's kingdom. The Bible sometimes uses the phrase Babylon to describe that, or Babel, but we're talking about the kingdom of Satan, this rebellious movement against God. Whether it exists in one giant unified whole, or rather in lots of little independent city-states kind of a feel, we don't know, but we know that they're unified in their hatred of God, and that it seeks to imitate God's kingdom, as above, so below. We know that in that kingdom there are rulers of the darkness. The Apostle Paul talks about this. Principalities and powers, the rulers of the darkness, the spiritual wickedness in this world. And we know that not all of these are rulers. Not every demon is a top shelf entity. There are outliers, ones that are less powerful, or maybe ones that just aren't organized and are kind of antisocial, and wander around and do their own thing. And we have theories, but God doesn't explain it to us in great detail. Instead, he asks us to trust in his power to overcome our foe, and not to trust in our own knowledge. There's big dogs and little dogs in the pack. A demon is a catch-all word that means evil spirit. And we're not giving here a list of the type of spiritual beings, but common to all periods is the concept that these beings are distinct from the kingdom of God. They're not God's spirits. They're enemies of God. And honestly, we're a long way from the culture of ancient Israel. And our hope here at the podcast is to help y'all understand how the ancients saw their world. And so in an attempt to do that, we're going to read a lengthy passage of Leviticus, which I've never said from the pulpit before. And it's a good thing I'm not at the pulpit now. And
It's going to be great.
when I told Jacob we were doing this, his eyes rolled back and he started snoring.
It's like, this is boring. Although I really do like
When you
this
said
passage.
his eyes rolled back, I got nervous.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you
Started
mean?
climbing up the
And
wall.
he started
Yeah.
to speak.
I was a little nervous when you started that, but they made me read through it. This is full disclosure. I had to read it out loud in front of everybody. So therefore, I will not be reading it live on the air with you guys today.
Oh, well, you're going to read some of it, aren't you?
I can if you need.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of pound through this idea. And before we jump into it, you're going to notice that it's talking about clean and unclean. It's not talking about laundry, and it's not talking about sin. It's talking about sacred space. In the ancient world, the idea was that God was holy and pure, and the world that we live in was messed up by us. And if you wanted to approach God, you needed to clean yourself up to do that. And so God would give you something you could do that would show your love of God and that you were desiring to change. And they're never really hard things like go slay a dragon. They're always something simple that you can do to emphasize your desire, your love for God. And they involve things that have to do with like the loss of life or the life-giving force. And so we're gonna get into this, but this is important to understanding the way that people viewed demons and people viewed God, because the demons would dwell in the unclean spaces of life, and God and his host would dwell in the sanctified or holy places of life. So Jacob, will you kind of read verses 4 and 5?
As long as you don't interrupt me. He shall put on the holy.
I'll interrupt
linen.
you if I feel like it.
Here we go. Here we go.
I knew that was coming.
Leviticus
That
16.
reminds me. No.
He
Go.
shall put on the holy linen coat, and shall have the linen undergarment on his body, and he shall tie the linen sash around his waist, and wear the linen turban. These are the holy garments. He shall bathe his body in water, and put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering.
All right, now this is interesting because we have him changing his clothes. Does changing your clothes get your prayers to heaven faster?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, so what's going on here? This is a way of showing that you're entering into sacred space. I'm not going in like I was. I'm going to clean up. And he's wearing special clothes. I like that it says holy garments. It always reminds me of Monty Python and like the holy hand grenade. And it's just a spoof off of this. But it's not saying that these garments have holiness in them. It's saying these are special for this event. I use them only for this. And by wearing them, you were telling everyone around you that something unusual was happening.
Is this why people wear nice clothes to church?
No, they do that because they think they're better than me.
Okay.
I don't know why.
But
they do
holy
You
just
wear a
means
tie and a blazer.
holy just means to be set apart, right? So that these are holy in that aspect. They're set apart solely to go into this place.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception of holy meaning like God blessed them a certain way.
Yeah, I
so
think
they're
when
more
most people
powerful.
hear a holy piece of clothing, they think like holiness emanates from it.
Right.
And that's not what I mean. I mean, this is set apart for a specific thing. And
Like
then,
your Sunday shoes. You know, Mom always said, "Don't wear your Sunday shoes."
yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But the whole
totally
idea
not
that-
like that. But I just thought
The
of
whole
it.
idea of that is to get them in the right mental capacity or spiritual
Yeah, it's
capacity.
like when a judge wears his robes, he probably doesn't wear those to the ball game. It's for a specific purpose.
But they
Or
don't give him any superpowers.
They
by
don't give
putting
him
them on.
superpowers. They designate that this is a holy thing that's
It's almost
taking
like
place.
attaching. It's attached to the office,
Mm-hmm.
almost more than.
And this is important because everyone was watching this. The demonic world, the spiritual world, and the human world were aware of what was happening. And not only did he wear these holy clothes, but he would bathe his body in water and then put them on. And so he's cleaning himself the best that he can. Now, it doesn't say anything in there, that he has to be perfect or he can't have problems. It's simply saying, look, if you want to come into the presence of God, then act like you're coming into the presence of God. Now, can we approach the presence of God without wearing holy clothes?
yes,
Absolutely we can, because of the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. But I will tell you that if you're getting ready to go pray and you just like start praying while you're sitting in your recliner, you won't have the same experience as if you prepared yourself to go into a time of prayer.
That's right.
Fasting and praying or preparing yourself actually changes the way you view these things. And God knew that, and so he put it into this picture. Now, he then tells him to bring special things with him. He shall take from the congregation of Israel 2 male goats and 1 ram for a burnt offering. Now, this is going to become important later. You've heard perhaps the word scapegoat, and that's going to come into, that's what we're setting up here. So take a look at verse 6.
So I got an interesting thought that
Go ahead.
you said when he's doing all this, you mentioned everybody's looking in on him, including the demonic part of the realm or the demonic beings. Is that just a weird idea? That just kind of struck me sideways a little bit, that they're like looking in on this. And what are they trying to accomplish by watching this? Like hoping that he does it wrong, or like are they trying to trip him on his way up to the altar? Like,
Oh, well, maybe. I mean, in the book of Zechariah, we get an instance of the high priest, Joshua, who is accused by Satan in the courtroom of the Lord. And so there does seem to have been the idea that the Satan was watching and brought forward an
Ready to
accusation.
accuse. Yeah.
Ready to accuse.
that's a wild thought, I guess. When I think of myself, going into a prayer time or a service or anything like that, I'm not thinking of like, man, Satan's watching me right now. Like that to me
Yeah, that
puts
is intriguing.
some more emphasis on what I'm doing.
I would say that probably that's a time when he's more likely
Right. And
to be paying attention
That makes
to you.
perfect sense. But I guess I just look at it from such a selfish standpoint of like, I need to do this for myself or for my family and this, that, and the other. But it's like, man, there's a bigger game that's going on out there. And I'm being watched by not
That's
only
right.
God, but the other side as well. Because, they're hoping that I don't do what I'm about to do or and they're going to try whatever they can to prevent me from doing that. But that was just an interesting point. I guess I never thought of it from that perspective. So just wanted to bring that up, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's good.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to connect this to you better dress up nice to go to church. That's not what's being talked about here. This is saying if you're entering into sacred space, then be conscious of it.
Prepare yourself.
Prepare yourself for this. So let's look at verse 6. Deaton, would you read down to verse 10?
I will. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house.
So that's good practice. You start with yourself and you work your way out. So if he's going to attempt to make atonement for everybody, it's just like on the airplane when hopefully this never happens to me because I will die of a heart
Right.
attack. But when the air masks fall down out of the ceiling, they tell you to put yours on first and then help everyone around you. Same idea. He's being told, begin at home and work your way out. Keep going.
Then he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
So that is they were visualizing God as enthroned in the tabernacle, and they were bringing the goats before the Lord, even though he's unseen here. The idea is that he's present. There is a supernatural reality taking place, and just like they believed there was the supernatural presence of God, they believed outside the camp there was the supernatural presence of the enemy, of the watchers who are in the wilderness surrounding the camp of Israel. Keep going.
And these are the 2 goats that are for the sin offering, not
Yeah,
not the ram for the burnt offering.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for Azazel.
Now that freaks people right out. One goat is for the Lord, and the other goat is designated. If you've got a King James Bible here, they got really weirded out by this text, and they went with a very strange translation here. They came up with the word scapegoat, but there is a proper name here, and it's a word. It's a name. It's Azazel, and this is a name of a demonic entity that dwelt in the desert. It was something that was believed by the Israelites, and they thought, okay, this goat he's got something to do with the Lord. And this goat has something to do with Azazel. It is not a sacrifice to Azazel. I want you to know this. This is not God saying, make a sacrifice to a demon. It's going to become clear what they're going to do with this, and it's actually brilliant and insulting
Is
to
Azazel,
Azazel.
Is Azazel a spiritual entity that comes from Egypt that they're bringing?
So
with
there's a
them?
lot
Or
of
do you think-
questions about this because so many different groups have latched on to this idea and created backstory. It seems to be a demonic figure associated with the wilderness and also connected to the book of Enoch and the fall of the Watchers. But ultimately, what you're dealing with here is a demonic being.
So I'm just wondering if they're familiar with this being. Is this new to them from their journey from Israel?
I don't
or
think
from
so.
Egypt?
The Israelis in their wandering in the wilderness are making sacrifices to the wilderness demons, and Moses has to go say, "Hey, stop that!
Yeah,
don't offer anything to them.
They're not doing. This is not
You're not buying
maybe
passage through here.
The
God is
concepts
leading
are new,
you."
but the pieces here are not new.
Yeah, and we're just not told. It's another one of those things I would really like to know. And for the Bible to say, by the way, let me tell you about Azazel. Here's an extra chapter on his backstory. That would be fascinating to me. We don't get it. We do get references to this being as being connected to the desert and being connected to the wilderness. Later on, groups are going to use this word to mean Satan. It doesn't mean that it is Satan, but it's a Satan-esque figure. Yeah. And so Aaron has one goat that has a job that's related to the temple, and he has another goat that's related to the wilderness. This is a two-tree image again, except here we should have called this podcast Two Goats.
Dang it, we missed our opportunity.
Keep going.
This is the Two Goats
Maybe we'll say that on our next episode.
But could we have 7 episodes about goats? The same way we did about
I don't know many good goat stories.
We can try it.
I'll try.
Verse 9. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and use it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel.
So one of these goats actually becomes part of the ceremony of the temple, and it becomes a sacrifice to cover the sins. And then what happens is the other goat becomes a weaponized carrier of sin. They would ceremonially put the sin on the goat and send it out into the wilderness. And this is the ancient Israelite version of throwing your trash in your enemy's yard, saying, this is where sin belongs. We may have taken it upon ourselves, and we're sorry. We've confessed it to God, and now we're sending it back. We're sending it back where it came from. Now, they used the imagery of the wilderness. We know that it's more than that. It's the idea of the realm of sin, the kingdom of darkness.
I think it's perhaps even better than the trash analogy, because sin to me is the way that the darkness or that Satan keeps us away from God, right? So if you're thinking of it as a battlefield, sin is bullets and bombs and grenades. And so Satan throws those at us. They turn around and package them up and say, here's what you tried to get us away from God with.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like trash. It's like, you remember all your best efforts to win? Here they are. You can have them back type of idea. So I think that's even maybe a stronger analogy than the trash thing. That's pretty cool. I like that.
So when this goat sent out, I always just pictured it kind of like wandering, trying to figure out a place. But did they not like follow this thing behind? I mean, did they?
Yeah, so they ran it way out there, and people were afraid for years to come. If you found a random goat, like wandering around, like most people would be like, score,
yeah, awesome,
money in the bank. Except for now, people think to themselves, is that the scapegoat? I can't afford to bring that back home with me. And in Christian iconography, the goat becomes a way of symbolizing Satan and of symbolizing the darkness. Even today, like you talked about Baphomet a minute ago, that's the idea. It actually got to the point later on where a group of guys would accidentally run it off a cliff just to make sure that it stayed out there. But it has to do with this concept of the demonic and the realm of God, that these two things don't mix. They're like the two trees. They are representations of something much bigger. And this being, Azazel, who is a real being, is not a rival of God. He's an enemy of God. But God's not saying you better give Azazel a goat too, because I don't want him to be mad at me.
This process, though, really doesn't have a lot to do with Azazel. It has more to do with a picture to the children of Israel of packaging
power,
up the sin and sending
yes.
it out of the camp.
It isn't that Azazel is a rival. Azazel is a nothing in the eyes of God. The Lord is saying, I do what I want. I go where I want. I throw my trash in your temple. I package up your bullets and send them back. This isn't him saying, well, the Lord was worried about, his relationship with the other gods. That's not it at all.
Right.
The Lord our God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome. This is how they expressed that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very different from the way that we would go about this today.
Would we have like a contemporary, like something that we would do contemporary that would be similar to that?
I can't think of it other than to say that ultimately this picture is fulfilled with Christ.
Yeah.
And Jesus bears our sins on the cross, and he dies for our sins, and he descends into hell, and he rises again.
So maybe wearing a cross or something.
All of
around
this
your
is
neck.
fulfilled with Jesus.
This is the
Go
Day
ahead.
of Atonement, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I just think like someone posed the question of Jesus dying on Passover, and wouldn't it have been better? They'll use the word better. I hate saying like the better plan, God, if you would listen to me. But just like the Day of Atonement, wouldn't have been as significant for it to be on this particular date or holiday because of what this represented.
Sure. I mean, why not?
Who art thou to pry against God? Shall the thing formed? I'm sorry.
That sounded like King James over
It
there.
was. Why hath thou made me thus?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
Romans 9. Yeah, good job. But I think in Exodus 12:12, you get the idea that God walks through Egypt. And the idea is he's broken down the defenses and the city is open to his attack. And that's Passover.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord walks where he wills. There is nothing that can stop the will and work of God. But I want to emphasize this again. This is not the Bible. And I keep hearing this from people, that the Bible was about sacrificing to other gods. And that's absolutely not true. This is not a sacrifice. The goat needs to stay alive. It then goes out into the wilderness because that is the place where life doesn't naturally happen. Naturally, you die when you're out there.
This
And so
goat-
they associate that with the realm of death and demon.
This goat was covered in blood.
Yeah.
When the whole nation
Visualizing-
watched this thing
Yeah.
leave,
Yes.
would it be a celebratory moment for everyone or a somber moment?
I think it would have been
seems like everybody celebrate everything.
If you
in
gave an
Israel.
entire country of children sticks and rocks and said, chase that animal, they're not going to do it somberly. At least
my
not if
kids
my
would
kid
not.
is any.
Slingshots are out. Yeah, this is going to be a good day.
So let's jump down a little bit. We're running low on time, so we want to make sure we get a little bit more here to verse 20. Jacob, will you read that? Because Martin has sworn he will not read anymore.
I already read it once. That's good enough.
And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. And Aaron shall lay both of his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins. And he shall put them on the head of the goat and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who is in readiness. The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area, and he shall let the goat go free in the wilderness.
So this is the image of the demonic world and the realm of God. There is holy space and there is unholy space. We by nature dwell in unholy space. This is the world that we live in. And the Bible uses this imagery lots of times. We're going to read one more text and then we're going to end this because this is an introduction, not to just the idea of demons, but I'm trying to show you the worldview that people had when dealing with the demonic world in the ancient world and not just in our world today. And this comes from the book of Zechariah, chapter 5, verses 5 through 11. And you get a very similar story to the scapegoat. Now, Martin, this isn't Leviticus. Are you okay
I can
reading
give it a, I
from
can give it a
Zechariah?
run. Sure. Starting in verse 5, then the angel who talked with me came forward and said to me, lift your eyes and see what this is that is going out.
So this is a vision. This isn't really happening. This is a supernatural vision that God is giving to him. And he says, watch, I'm going to show you something. Keep going.
And I said, what is it? He said, this is the basket that is going out.
Well, that's very clear. This
And-
one goes where? this basket goes
Out.
away. Away. Go ahead.
And he said, "This is their iniquity in all the land. And behold, the leaden cover was lifted, and there was a woman sitting in the basket. And he said, This is wickedness. And he thrust her back into the basket and thrust down the leaden weight on its opening."
Okay, so this image he shows you inside of this big basket is a figure that represents sin. That represents sin. In the book of Revelation, you get an instance of this, the whore of Babylon, that's described there. So here, it's not an imaginary sin. Here it personifies the sin as a person, as a woman, and she goes into the basket, and what happens?
Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 2 women coming forward. The wind was in their wings. They had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between earth and heaven.
So this is the only place in the Bible where you find winged women. Okay? And the implication
I
is
knew it.
these are not good ones. They hover between heaven and earth in a nowhere. They are neither of this world nor of the other. They have wings like the wings of the stork, which was an unclean critter living out in the wilderness. And it says, what did they do? And this is where it's going to connect the idea. So this is not, I don't think these are angels, okay? I think this is a symbolic representation of something. But it's very similar to the scapegoat. Watch what happens.
Then I said to the angel who talked with me, Where are they taking the basket? He said to me, To the land of Shinar, to build a house for it. And when this is prepared, they will set the basket down there on its base.
To the land of Shinar, and there they will build a house for it. Shinar should ring a bell. That's the site of Babel. That's Babylon. They are flying the wickedness of Israel to Babylon and building a temple for it. These are demonic representations. This is the same idea. Where does the sin belong? It belongs in Babylon. It belongs in the courts of darkness, not in the courts of the Lord. And so when we sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He forgives us our sins. We don't hold on to them. We don't treasure them. We don't keep them. They're taken away. They're not ours to hold on to. And it has to do with this concept of the 2 realms, a physical realm and a spiritual realm. And in both there is rebellion. This is a way of talking about where the powers, the spiritual powers of darkness dwell. In one instance, it says in the wilderness. Here it says Babylon. Both are ways of talking about the same idea, the kingdom of darkness. Jacob, you got a thought here?
I was just, I'm thinking about putting out an apology for the few ladies at Word of Life that I used this verse on. It was terrible. It was terrible. I just thought that's the only thing that's in my head right now as I'm reading this passage. Like, oh no, I knew what it meant at that point in time, but I jokingly was like,
demons?
"This is wickedness," and I would shove their head down. Yeah, it was bad. It was joking, but it was it was bad.
Where
I
was
a
it at?
Pharisee. I'm not gonna say. It was at my Bible college in New York.
Word of life, maybe?
Yes. Oh my God.
That's a good place to end it, my friends. So next time we're going to get into a little bit more specifics about demons in the New Testament. We're going to talk about demon possession. We're going to talk about ghosts. We're going to talk about the creepy, forgotten corners of the Bible, my friends. My voice is giving out, which means it's a good place to end it. I wish you well, and I hope that you remember that the Lord our God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the Lord mighty and awesome.